saw an article out of North Carolina this last week that said they were readying a new slate of incentives and policies in North Carolina so they can compete with Georgia. There's always somebody in our rearview mirror, and we always have to be focused on that competitiveness.
More than 3,000 business and political leaders learn more about the state's future during Eggs and Issues at Mercedes-Benz Stadium this morning. Good morning and good evening, and welcome to Lawmakers on this day 3 of the Georgia legislative session. I'm Donna Lowry in Atlanta. We'll have more about Eggs and Issues in a moment. As the session begins, the Georgia Democratic Caucus is putting a strong focus on maternal mortality. Each day in the House, members are offering statistics on how Georgia is among the worst states for pregnancy-related deaths. On the show, legislators from both sides of the aisle will explain why Georgia is failing in this area and point to some possible solutions. Also, you'll learn why the Georgia Chamber unveiled a report on the new Georgia economy, what that means, and the efforts to train the state's workforce. I did an expansive interview with the president and CEO of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, Chris Clark. All right, though, first, let's kick off the show with the latest from the Gold Dome with our Capitol correspondent, Sarah Callis.
Hi, Donna. Lawmakers started their day bright and early at the annual Georgia Chamber of Commerce Eggs and Issues breakfast, where policy goals were on the menu. Leaders from across the state talked about the issues they think are most important this year. Governor Kemp also laid out his priorities, including funding for a dental college at Georgia Southern University and a medical school at the University of Georgia.
With these new assets on the way, we will further address the growing need for healthcare professionals in our state and ensure that we are doing everything that we can to address the challenges across the healthcare spectrum.
In addition, Kemp announced significant infrastructure funding.
This year, I'll be proposing an additional $50 million in the amended 24 budget and $6 million in the base funding for fiscal year 25 that will go to this fund, ensuring these type of strategic investments continue.
He is expected to detail his goals more in tomorrow's State of the State address. Speaker of the House John Burns also discussed his priorities today in a press conference. Burns said he wants to focus on what he calls kitchen table issues this session. One of those issues affecting healthcare, certificates of need. This legal document is part of the process to create a new hospital or medical facility in an area.
We want to leave no stone unturned when it comes to improving healthcare options for Georgians. So we have somewhat. We will look further because there's no discussion that the House can't have. We will look at what it means to expand healthcare opportunities in the state.
Burns also said the House is looking at other ways medical coverage can be expanded for Georgians. The 2024 elections were also on Burns' mind. Burns said he wants to give the Office of Elections autonomy from the Secretary of State's office. In the House, State Representative Barry Fleming said goodbye to the chamber.
The barb of old said, parting is such sweet sorrow, is it not? Thank you all for allowing me to serve with you. God bless all of you, and God bless this great state of Georgia. Thank you.
He was tapped by Governor Kemp to serve as a Superior Court judge in Columbia County. Tomorrow on Legislative Day 4, legislators will host Governor Kemp in a joint session of the House and Senate as he delivers his State of the State address. Democrats will also give their response. That's my Capitol Report. Donna, back to you.
Our thanks to Sarah Callis for that report. The American Medical Association ranks Georgia among the worst states when it comes to women dying from problems related to childbirth. The Georgia Department of Public Health reports about 30 pregnancy-related deaths per 100,000 live births between 2018 and 2020. More than half were non-Hispanic Black women, 34% were non-Hispanic white, and 7% Hispanic or Latino. 60% of the patients were insured by Medicaid. Bias and discrimination accounted for 15% of the deaths, and 89% of the deaths could have been prevented. Joining me are two representatives who have a lot of knowledge on this topic. Republican Representative Sharon Cooper of Marietta is chair of the House Public Health Committee, and Democratic Representative Park Cannon is from Atlanta. Welcome to Lawmakers, to both of you.
Thank you.
Representative Cannon, I'm going to start with you. You presided over a Georgia House Democratic Caucus statewide public hearing last week about. Tell us what that was all about.
Well, we really wanted to start the year off very clear that as we walk into the General Assembly on Monday, that's not the start of it. We should be starting beforehand, and we should be hearing from the people. So we hosted a hearing. We heard from 25 different Georgians. For example, the chair and founder of the Maternal Mortality Review Committee that reviews the deaths was a speaker. We also had some other nonprofits, doctors, and people themselves who almost passed away, which you call a near-miss maternal experience, or someone who in their family actually has passed away. And now it's really moving to realize that we have the opportunity to take these next 36 days and write some policies that will make it better.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about that. I want to turn to Chair Cooper, because in 2019, you co-chaired a House study committee on maternal mortality. And so I want you to talk a little bit about those findings.
Well, we did. And to put it in a perspective that the general public can understand, there are about an average of 120,000 deliveries every year in Georgia, sometimes 110 deliveries, sometimes 130. And we have about 30 to 35 deaths each year. Now, I'd like to make it clear, one death of a mother is too much for me. My mother died when I was 12. I can't imagine never knowing my mother. But there are some deaths that are not preventable. And the American Medical Association, do not think takes into account that states vary on how we measure maternal mortality. Some states only measure about 60 days after a delivery. We go a whole year. And included in that year are deaths by car. They have added deaths by drug overdoses, by homicides, and it's very hard to relate those back to delivery. They are a problem. They're mental health problems or a homicide problem, but shouldn't be related to maternal mortality. And what I'm afraid of as we do this push and we talk about it being an emergency is that we're scaring Black and brown mothers to death, thinking that there's hundreds of mothers dying in our hospital every year. And that's just not true. And now some of those mothers are scared to go to hospitals and to doctors and are choosing alternative methods that are not as safe as the hospital. Today, in this age, with people being overweight, having babies earlier, and diabetes is rampant, I would say there's no such thing as a normal delivery. And you never know what's going to happen. And so I don't want Georgia mothers, no matter their race, to be scared to death to seek medical care.
Yeah. So I know you're a healthcare professional, so I appreciate your position on that. I wanted to get your response. Anything that you wanted to add to that?
Well, the facts are right here in the Department of Public Health's report, which they're a state agency. They said that there were 270 deaths over those 2-year periods.
3 years.
So for us to say that it is not even over 100 is just simply not factual. And that's why it's important to take a look at the reports. As you know, I'm a labor doula, I'm waiting on a baby right now, and I'm really excited to be working in the hospitals and to be working in the community. And the truth is that the reason that people are figuring out there are other options for early labor care is because sometimes the racial bias and the things that happen in hospital systems are making people's labor stall. And some of these providers, too, are realizing and agreeing that the rooms are so full. If someone can early labor at home, and there are absolutely normal births still taking place in Georgia, that they should do that.
What do you say to her when what Chair Cooper was talking about when it comes to scaring people? That sometimes just putting that information out there can scare people, and about even going to a hospital.
Well, consent and informed consent is the most important thing in healthcare practices. People should know what healthcare providers have as it relates to statistics on their care. So if there are certain hospitals that have high C-section rates, For people to know that, it's actually really empowering. I love sharing with my clients, hey, did you know these certain things about labor? They can prepare with their partners. They can help them figure out how to do a hip squeeze so he doesn't sit there and just kind of make her anxiety go up, but he actually is there having a conversation with the provider saying, oh, this is happening. I get where we are in the pregnancy process.
Yeah, and your response?
Well, Park has certainly a good one-on-one basis with patients. I would agree with her, but it's the constant beating that we have this medical emergency and the press and all and calling it an emergency, which we don't have in Georgia. And I think it was the 3-year period, to correct you, Park, on what they looked at. And you asked me a specific time on that, and I went to that expect. And I will say, the state is doing a lot of things. It takes time to make a difference. We have now done a great deal to prevent hemorrhages, which is a leading cause of deaths, preparing and teaching hospitals across this state on how to have these packages and people trained. I was able to get $20 million in the budget a couple of years ago. Until that time, we only covered mothers up to 60 days after they delivered. We now cover those mothers and keep them on Medicaid for a year. And so not only can we work with them on the pregnancy they had, but also about planning if they're going to have other children, so that they wait a time between it, so that they work on losing weight or getting diabetes under control. So we're now have pilot projects across the state to put nurses that work with moms out. So the state is doing a lot. We have a new nurse midwifery program in Milledgeville. This is where RNs go back and get master's degree in that specialty, and they can work with physicians getting prenatal care. So the state is moving, and we are not in a state of emergency. And my biggest thing is that to put it in perspective so that we do not scare women to death about pregnancy and delivery. And that's where I really disagree with a lot of what's being said.
There's a lot of information that the House is giving out each day of the session so far. Someone from the Democratic caucus has gone to the House floor to talk about maternal mortality. Today, Representative Syra Draper talked about her personal experience during childbirth.
I had a harrowing experience the first time I gave birth. If my good friend, who happened to be an OB nurse, hadn't advocated for me, I don't know what would have happened. And my guess is that every one of us in this chamber has either had such an experience personally or knows someone who has had such an experience or has lost someone they love during childbirth. Because even though having a child is a natural thing, it is also an extremely dangerous thing.
So let's talk a little bit about this. You guys are going to continue this the entire session, each day?
Oh, yeah.
We're going to do that?
We've got 36 days left, and right now we're wearing purple because we have looked at the movie The Color Purple, and we have seen how many maternal near miss, maternal coercion experiences were in that film, and we really feel like it pulls out the strength that we need on the House floor when people are telling us that Black women dying is not a state of emergency. Additionally, we're going to put out some reports on the desks tomorrow, and they're going to be flanked with these little bibs. We're really trying to make it clear. It might feel a little messy talking about this issue, but we can do it. We can do it.
Okay. Your response.
Well, here again, and you know me, Donna, I just tell it like it is.
You do.
This is an election year, and this is an election topic. And the Democrats think that they can make this issue. And, you know, it's an election year. I'm not saying Republicans don't. My biggest beef is that they talk about the people they brought in. There are people on the other side, experts, that do not agree with this report. It is a report done by them. And I will tell you that the Commissioner of Public Health doesn't agree with all of it. And Mercer and the medical schools here in Atlanta, have differences of opinion. And my thing, again, I will say over and over again, don't scare people. Don't twist it. saying that everybody, almost every woman in Georgia knows somebody that died in childbirth, or they know somebody, that is an exaggeration. I think people will tell you they've heard about it, or maybe it's happened, they've heard it on the television because it's been such a push. We are working on this. If I could prevent every mother and make it every delivery a wonderful experience, I would. And that we are working toward that. I have a master's in nursing. I've taught OB nursing. I know of what I speak. And like I say, I'm one to tell it straight like it is. And we are working on this issue. Georgia's moving forward. There's a lot of, positive things happening around this. And I wish every mother out there has a safe delivery.
I do have to ask one more question for you. Any legislation coming out of this?
We do. We have not yet published the report, so I don't know how anyone could be in opposition to the report. It lives on a Google Drive right now, so I'll make sure to send one to the commissioner, and I'll make sure to send them to the 2 schools that you said that are opposed to it, because they simply have not seen it. But as far as the policy solutions, there are some things that were already proposed that just haven't gotten across the goal last year that we have in the report, as well as some new things like creating a cardio-metabolic unit that can actually deal with what's happening with coronary issues, and looking at how we do postpartum mental health screenings. You don't really have anyone who's doing that. And so there are some new and some old.
Okay, I'm sure we're going to hear more about this, and apparently in the House on a regular basis during this session. I do want to get in a couple of other things. You've got something dealing with something dealing with Narcan and updating things related to overdoses.
Right.
Talk about
I mean,
that.
a few years ago, long before we were really talking about the fact of the addiction to opioids, just beginning, I passed a bill called the 911 Amnesty Bill, because we were having kids doing drugs, college kids, and somebody would get in dire medical danger, and the rest of their friends would be doing drugs, and they would abandon that person. We had kids left to die, then dumped on their mother's front yard. And so we passed one saying that if one person would call 911, stay with the individual in trouble, that even when help came, if that person that called, we would not charge that person, even if they were doing drugs, unless they were the dealer. That didn't count. And so that's the beginning of Narcan, and it had this how we could use Narcan. Now there are new drugs that work more effectively than Narcan, or as effectively. They have longer half-lives, which means one of the problems that we have with overdoses, the drugs are so strong and laced with fentanyl that sometimes you will use Narcan, the patient seems to recover, but the Narcan wears off, and then they relapse again and can die. And so you can give Narcan again, but there are some of the new drugs that are longer. And Emory wants to put Narcan and other drugs that work against opioids, and the fentanyl, they want to put them in dispensing machines and all. And we need to change the laws. And also the standing order that the public health commissioner has had on the books. She has to change that to include these other new drugs. So, you pass bills, and then the times change, and you need to update them, and that's what we're doing.
Well, we'll keep an eye on that. We'll certainly keep an eye on what you're doing with maternal mortality, and keep up with the debate, and let our viewers know about it.
Oh, don't worry, we will.
Thank you both for being here. All right, thank you both for being here. Coming up, I talked to the head of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce about a new report on the new Georgia economy and what it means for the state's job market.
Lawmakers is made possible by Georgia Farm Bureau. With over 80 years of helping everyone understand the importance of agriculture in our state. After all, ag is Georgia's #1 industry. Food and fiber production represents over $74 billion in output of Georgia's strong economy. The Georgia Farm Bureau legislative team works to represent producers across Georgia at the state capitol during the session and year-round. Georgia Farm Bureau, the voice of Georgia farmers.
People put their faith in PBS because they know that it is constantly delivering quality. It covers the whole of the United States. It's a free and independent media.
We go where the viewers are.
What are the conversations that are happening right now?
We feel that civil discourse is a civic responsibility.
What we do is authentic reporting that people can trust.
We give time so you can hear voices on all sides of an issue.
This is the place that people turn to for stories that matter.
And they know that when they walk away, they will have learned something about the world around them.
That's why this makes PBS important for daily life and, in the end, our world.
Thank you for joining us.
Community. Learning, working, playing, celebrating, doing life is always better together. At GPB, we aim to provide you with the tools to be able to do life together well. Our mission to educate, inform, and entertain inspires everything from our wide range of programming to our stimulating radio conversations to our fun in-person events. We've got something for everyone. Visit gpb.org/community to learn more about our upcoming events.
Welcome back to Lawmakers. I'm Donna Lowry. This year, as always, the Eggs and Issues Breakfast served as one of the highlights of the first week of the Georgia General Assembly. More than 3,000 people attended, and they each received a copy of this book. It's called the Red Book 2024. It's a report on economic competitiveness in the state. So what's that all about? Before everyone arrived this morning, I had a chance to ask that question and more of the president and CEO of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, Chris Clark. My first question to him was, with Georgia ranked as the #1 state for business for 10 years in a row, how do you keep up the momentum?
So we're excited today. We're announcing the creation of the new Center for Workforce and Talent Preparedness to help pair more high schools with the businesses in their community. We're announcing a grant this morning with the Department of Education to fund rural communities all throughout the state for internships, apprenticeships, entrepreneur programs. So that'll be a big focus for us for this year and next year. Also at the session, though, we're going to really focus on occupational licensure reform. You know, Georgia has more licensed occupations than any other state in the country. It's hard sometimes for military spouses or for people looking for a second chance to get those designations. So we've been working with the Secretary of State and the State Senate all year, try to lower those barriers. The other thing from a workforce standpoint that we really hope we move the needle on this session is dealing with workforce housing. You know, home ownership in Georgia is down to 64%. And my son's generation, the Generation Z, experts tell us that they'll be 45 years old before they can afford their own home. That's not good enough. That's not the American dream. So we hope to deal with that this session as well.
Yeah, so the workforce housing also deals with the number of companies that are coming in. What a boom for Georgia.
Absolutely.
But finding places for people to live in those communities.
In the communities where they're serving, right? If I'm a teacher, if I'm a police officer, I want to live where I serve. And right now, we don't make that easy for a lot of folks.
Yeah. Let's talk about infrastructure a little bit. Sure. What's the infrastructure of the future you talk about?
So if you look at the next 6 years, we're going to add 750,000 more people to the state of Georgia, which is just a remarkable number. We're also going to add 1 million more cars to the road. And by 2050, the Georgia ports tell us that we'll add about 91% additional container traffic. Now, that's all great. That creates jobs, but also creates issues for us. And so DOT tells us that we need to spend about $84 billion over the next 20 years to build alternative routes, to fix our bridges, railroads, airports, to move people and goods around safely. The good news is about 70% of Georgians support that investment. And so we look forward to having this discussion with the General Assembly and with the governor about how we make a down payment on that long-term infrastructure, because anytime we talk about roads and bridges, you're talking about a 20-year project, right? It's not just something we go fix like a bridge in a couple of weeks. So that's a big one for us. And then also finishing Unit 4 at Plant Vogel, building out more natural gas distribution in the state, more solar. We're going to need more energy in the long term, safe, affordable, clean. And we can do all that. We've got the right utility providers. We've got the right Public Service Commission. But we've got to plug in all these electric vehicles we're building in Georgia. And so we've got to start making a lot of that investment now.
And there is a big push to continue Georgia as a leader when it comes to electric vehicles, right?
Buckle of the battery belt, right? Anything in that electric space. And I think it's so interesting, it's expanded. Obviously, Hyundai and Rivian, Kia now is going to build the EV9 here in the state of Georgia. You've got now electric buses being built at Bluebird. But you've also got these battery plants with SK. You've got the solar with Q-Cells. You're just seeing just this proliferation of this next generation of transportation. We now have a hydrogen producer. Hyundai just announced that all of their vehicles moving from the port of Savannah to the plant outside of Savannah will all be hydrogen. And so we're really in the middle of a revolution, and I give a lot of credit to Governor Kemp and our General Assembly for laying the foundation, Department of Economic Development for rolling out the red carpet and bringing those folks here.
How do we remain competitive in this state, though?
Well, I think that's the third leg of the stool, right? North Carolina had an article this week where they're saying we're targeting Georgia. Now, last year, Alabama's governor said we got to do better to compete with Georgia. Texas just passed new economic development incentives. And so we'll be advocating for what the governor's already announced, which is lowering the state income tax, keeping the incentives that we've got, making them more transparent, more competitive, doing anything we can to cut red tape. The lieutenant governor's got his red tape rollback commission that we're a part of. So all of those things, just with this mindset of how do we continue to be a little bit better. And then the big issue that the business community has dealt with and will continue to deal with is lawsuit abuse. Whether you're a farmer, whether you're a doctor, a hospital administrator, a small business owner, you've got a lawsuit system right now that's focused on jackpots and not justice. And so we want to try to just level the playing field, a couple of bills this year to help with that.
Yeah, tort reform.
Tort reform, right.
Yeah, big on the governor's list. What other things would you like to see happen during this legislative session?
It's going to be a busy session. We're going to play a lot of offense on these issues. Obviously, and I don't think people really think about public safety as a workforce development issue, but it absolutely is. If your employees aren't safe, if they don't feel comfortable coming to work, they're not going to come to work. They're going to go find somewhere else. And so supporting what the Attorney General has done related to gang activity, with human trafficking, with an incredible issue that we've got in this state, which is organized retail crime. That's about a $3 billion a year hit to the state's economy. So we'll continue to look for opportunities to address those issues too.
How about in the area of healthcare? Your new chairman is within the healthcare industry.
My outgoing chairman,
chairman.
Neil Pruitt, is in the healthcare space. I think there are a couple of different issues there. One is obviously access, making sure, particularly in our rural communities and now in our urban areas, to make sure that we've got access, quality access for folks. But the biggest issue with healthcare right now, Donna, is making sure that we've got the workforce that we need. Think about these statistics for a minute. Right now in Georgia, there are 40,000 healthcare job openings. In 3 years, there'll be 61,000 healthcare job openings, and by 2030, 101,000 healthcare job openings in Georgia. So more nursing programs, more doctor programs, more clinicians, anything you can think in that healthcare space. We're going to find ways to get young people into those career pathways and to make sure our colleges and our technical colleges have the resources they need to give them the skill sets to go back and take care of all of us as we get a little bit older.
Talk about tax incentives. What are your feelings about that?
So we have spent all year working with Chairman Blackman and Chairman Huffstetter looking at competitiveness, transparency, accountability, and I appreciate that look. Listen, we need to continue to look at ways to tweak and improve. We've made some recommendations about how to make those incentives more impactful. Some of them are a little outdated. And so we look forward to continue that discussion as we go. But what we need to remember is we've had many of these incentives in place for 30 years. They've worked incredibly well. Companies count on them. Site selectors that look to move to Georgia count on them. And we just want to make sure that that toolbox that our economic developers have, particularly in rural communities, is full and robust, and they have what they need to go out there and compete. These aren't giveaways. These are just leveling the playing fields with other states. If you look at any incentive that we have in Georgia, it's based on the fact that in another state there's a different tax structure. That's what we're doing, is just level the playing field for Georgia companies and Georgia small businesses that use these same exact credits every single day.
A great conversation. He talked about 3 major things. I'll recap that: talent and workforce development in Georgia, infrastructure for the future, and also competitiveness. These are things you'll be hearing about in the business community and during this legislative session. My huge thanks to Chris Clark for taking the time to chat with us today about that. And that does it for Lawmakers today. We'll be back tomorrow for Legislative Day 4, and it is an hour show, an extended look at the governor's State of the State address, plus we'll have the Democratic response. So we'll hope you will join us. We'll have some analysts here too to talk about it. Have a good night.